Welcome back to another episode of the HMG podcast. I'm one of your hosts. My name is Gorcin, and joining me today is Dan.
Hello.
And Jacob.
Hey guys, how we doing?
We're going to do an event recap episode today, and we're going to be looking at the recent training camp that I ran here in Perth, Western Australia. This training camp is for the upcoming World Open War. This is a new team tournament that's going to be happening in 2023. This is the inaugural year in the UK in October, and I was requested to put a team together to represent the Australians. Now, the spots are pretty heavily contested and had a long list of players who wanted to rock up, and I didn't really know how to choose from the list. Obviously, I couldn't afford to pay people to go. I couldn't afford to pay for their flight, so that narrowed the list of 20 or 30 potential players down to a measly 14, which is a lot more than the team of 3 that I had room for. So I decided I would get the knives out and let them play a tournament so they could decide who would go. Now, the tournament wasn't exclusively limited to people who were potential candidates for the team. I kind of left it a bit open, but I did kind of let people know what they're in for. This was going to be a no-holds-barred, full competitive thing. Now, you guys know me, you know my players packs. They're usually a bit funky. This one isn't mine, so to speak. I basically just took the World Open War Players Pack, I turned it into a single-player format, because with 14 players, it just got a bit awkward otherwise. Picked 3 out of the 5 missions, whacked in the secondaries, and away we went. Now, what was surprisingly very controversial decision that affected the list-building videos that Jacob and Tyler did for World Open War was that it actually went from a dual platoon generic reinforced platoon format to a single generic reinforced platoon. Talking to the organizers, he basically said that, you know, with 2 platoons, you end up playing pseudo tank war, and he wasn't really about that, which I think was fair enough. Although I was a bit surprised that the event originally started as dual platoons, because it's not really a surprise what you get when you look at a dual platoon, right? Because the thing that you're gaining is all of the one-off slots, flamethrowers, cars, tanks, so people would and artillery pieces particularly, that's kind of what you see more of. And they decided that wasn't their cup of tea, and fair enough. I can very much see why they wouldn't necessarily want dual platoons. We sort of shy away from it here in Australia for pretty much that exact reason, as far as I can tell. The game works, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to sit here and say that it doesn't, but you certainly skew things in quite a different way. You end up with about 4 armored vehicles. And anyway, I'm pontificating. It's 1,100 points, 24 order dice maximum, not minimum. I had to clarify that more than once, actually, that you could bring less than 24 order dice. I'm not sure why that needed clarification, but, you know, it's 2023, here we are. So the 3 missions that were being played, which I'm not going to remember, and I'm going to check my notes, is key positions with 5 objectives, sectors, which is a really good... both of them are actually pretty good bread and butter competitive missions if you're sticking to the rulebook. Bolt Action Alliance has some really nice competitive ones. Our mission pack's got some nice competitive ones too. And then the last one is meeting engagement. Pretty straightforward. I think we randomly rolled for 3 out of the 5. I can't remember exactly how I say we, like it was more than just me who wrote this pack. Randomly picked 3 out of the 5 that I think I liked the most. A couple of key things to note about this one. There are some secondaries, but they're pretty, like, some of them you're just going to get anyway, and they're kind of gimmies. But a few of the other ones were pretty colorful, actually. Very assault heavy, all of the secondaries. But the key thing is the secondaries you only use for tiebreakers. So previous events that I've run, I've just counted secondaries as victory points and called it a day. What the organizers for World Open War are doing is that the secondaries are tiebreakers. So if you don't win on mission primaries, you then do your countbacks and your secondaries. So that's more or less enough pontificating from me. Dan, do you want to maybe talk us through, looking at this pack, what list you wanted to take and why, and how your list building process went?
Yeah, I think so. Both Jacob and I played in the event, and potentially slightly different reasons for playing as well. So originally I was looking as potentially being a player who would try to get over to the UK, or at least be in whatever system we put together to decide who was going. And then I had a couple of things that changed my mind as to whether that was appropriate. So instead, what I said is, okay, so wherever I can and however I can, I will simply help train and assist those that want to go. And the intent being, we don't play a lot of super competitive events in WA specifically. Certainly over East, we have some that are more aligned in Australia to international standards, but not necessarily within our small group. And so my main purpose...
60 players, not that small of a group.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. If we could get them all in one place at one time, and that 50-man tournament is actually doable. We just got to chain everyone up and let them play. But so the purpose that I was going with then was the list that I wanted to take was something different that we hadn't seen in Perth in particular, something which you wouldn't necessarily match up to the army type that was coming. And also to make sure that I was giving players hard choices that they needed to make quickly, because one of the constraints that we had overall typically is obviously a time in the round. And so I wanted to force my opponents to have to think on their feet quickly to help get them into that mindset of you need to make faster decisions that are more beneficial. As that was the case, I chose to take a Japanese army. And the Japanese, and I took a very unstereotypical Japanese army. So no bamboo.
It certainly had the Dan special sauce, that's for sure.
It did, yeah. No spear fighters, no Horo assault guns, which is the heavy howitzer thing. It's a brilliant piece, but I didn't take any of that. I mean, even within some of the other pieces, like I didn't take massive big squads of Japanese anything. And in fact, I had 2 squads of 10 riflemen with light machine guns, and I had that was a different event. For that event, for the World Open War, I took 3 units of grenadiers with 3 light mortars each, so there's 9 light mortars to start with. I then took a light mortar team, so it was 10 light mortars within the list. And I can already hear the internet screaming in outrage over that, but bear with me. And I then took a couple of other support weapons, the anti-suicide lunge miner teams, commander, 1 unit of 15 inexperienced rifles, which was a big blob squad to sit on objectives with a political officer, and they were there just to absorb it and look like they were a threat. And then I took 2 Ho-Ki carriers, but the models are Ho-Has, so they were a little bit larger on the actual physical model. Essentially, it's a 13-man half-track with a machine gun, or tracked vehicle with a machine gun. And the purpose of that list was not to throw smoke everywhere, which is what some of the followers of the podcast might assume, but was to simply pin units out or stop advance of units by simply just dropping multiple light mortars on. Now, mortars themselves, 3 in a unit, you're still only going to max out your D2 pins. You're not going to stack on additionals on top.
But I think there's a wording in Armies of Japan or something that implies you get the multiple D2 pins. I've seen it come up a few times in a few different places. And I think I can't recall the wording exactly, but I've seen a few screen grabs of like Discord servers and stuff where people are just like, "Oh, is that how that's supposed to work?" And the answer is no. It's in the core rulebook. I think it. Again, I don't recall exactly the wording, but it's something along the lines of you take the single largest source of pins from the firing unit.
Right. What you can do, however, because they are an indirect fire weapon, is split fire them off to different units. And so in my list, where I have essentially 10 light mortars, which I could potentially target, let's say, 4 or 5 different units, and they're going to take potentially 2 light mortars apiece. That does stack if they're coming from different unit sources. They're different order activations, different units. So in my head, how I set up all my missions that I was playing is that I had this sort of cross-section of more just raining down on a certain section of the board across a few different units. And very quickly people learned that those 3 mortars aiming at the 1 unit and then being targeted by another 3 mortars at the same time. Okay, sure, I'm only taking D2 pins from each of them, but it's also like most people didn't choose to go down. So then when I was rolling hits, each of those mortars typically was 2 or 3 guys a piece. That when they
Pretty
were hitting,
reliably, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I've taken my chances to almost 50-50 with 3 of them in the squad. Not quite 50-50.
Yeah, 33%, 1 in 3, give or take.
But when I'm shooting 2 squads of 3
Yeah.
at the same target, it's one of those 6 typically going to go in hit. And then they were finding the problem of, oh well, now I've got these pins I need to clear, because if I don't, I'm now potentially going to take 6 mortars, 2 hits per mortar if I don't go down.
Yeah.
It's like, well, wait a minute, that's 12 hits. And that's the scary part, because people were like, wait, my squad can just get wiped out by turn. No, I don't like this. I don't like this at all. It's a very select mechanic. It's probably not something in the concentration that you'll see in that same form. You'll see instead in like quad flat cannons or MMG guns, where it's the potential that your unit just disintegrates and suddenly is not effective on the table. But it also shows you that just because I'm playing a Japanese army doesn't mean I'm going to run at you. There are different ways to play different armies.
And interestingly, most of our experienced and veteran listeners will have cottoned on that the best way to beat a mortar is to get under it, particularly if you're talking a light mortar, because they're 12 to 24. And I know we just talked about how D2 pins can be oppressive, but we also know that on 1 or 2 pins on a regular unit, even without a first lieutenant, you're still looking at a pretty decent chance of activating, or a second lieutenant. Sorry. If you've got your second lieutenant around, just get that squad under that mortar and you're good to go. And remembering the key thing about targeting is that you always target the closest model in the unit. So that means if you just have one model who's 11.9 inches away from that light mortar, that mortar shot fails. So it's actually quite interesting, because kind of the last thing you want to do is get yourself within 12 inches of Japanese, unless you're Gurkhas or you've got something, you have to have a few things go right before you want to risk that. So I think it's actually an interesting counterplay where at face value you just go, oh, okay, that's no problem, I just get under borders. And then you get closer to them and you're like, that's
a
10-man squad of fanatics. And now I'm in charge range. I'm not really confident about this position anymore.
And that's where I had a lot of people, as they were playing, they were just like, around turn 2 in particular, when I'd suddenly laid things out and started to start the ranging process, they're like, turn 2, okay, I think I know what I need to do. And then in turn 3, they were like, I'm not so confident I know how to handle this list, because if I push to get under your mortars, well, first of all, they're moving fire, so your whole units just basically back off and just attempt to range in again.
Also an open play,
and so open the board up and stuff. It's like, but if I hold back, then I'm not on the objectives, which means I can't capitalize, and so it was. For the purpose that I went and built the list for, it did exactly what it needed to do, which was force people to think a little bit differently about the game, which was a net positive for how we play in Perth. Was it successful from a competitive viewpoint? No, I would not have taken that list in a space to win. But that wasn't why I attended.
Let's briefly touch on round 1, actually, because I think that's a pretty interesting conversation. I think we'll do Dan's round 1, and then Jake, you can give us your brief. So round 1, you're talking key positions. You've got 5 key positions. You're up against a great friend of the show, Michael A. And he was running what I thought was a pretty kooky list, but I was kind of a fan of it. It has like a pretty open play. Like you get what it's trying to do, but at the same time, that even if you stop that, you're still just like, I don't know what to do next. And I played against it once, and I managed to get a win, but I think it just kind of had more to do with like having the right unit hit the right thing at the right time. But before I labor the point anymore, so he's got a 16 dice, he's got first lieutenant, and and 2 squads of Panzer Grenadiers with a couple of submachine guns, and he's got the motorized infantry rule. So a couple of you guys are probably cotton on to what's about to happen, but I think very few of you are actually really going to see what's occurring here. We got a chaplain as well, which is a bit of a hot pickup. Stern Pioneer Assault Engineer Squad. No pistol, no anti-tank pistol, but he's got the flamethrower. No surprise there. It's why you take them. Sorry, 3 squads of Panzer Grenadiers, all motorized. Medium mortar, inexperienced, which is just the ubiquitous pickup nowadays. It's the mortar equivalent of a Stuart, I think. Regular sniper team, which I think is the right pickup. A regular flamethrower. He did get the Panzerzerstörer-Truppen in there. Now, this is a bit of a controversial unit because I thought it was available in generic reinforcement too. And some people are saying that it isn't. But what I think has happened is that there are 2 different versions of this unit.
Right.
One of them isn't legal in a generic reinforcement platoon, and one is. But the one that's in Easy Army is the one that's not legal. I think that's what happened. But I think like points wise and everything,
it's all the same.
I think just one has the sentence and one doesn't. So I missed it. I missed it in list review. But in the grand scheme of things, I think if there's an equivalent unit that's legal,
who cares?
Yeah. And also, it's a pretty inefficient unit. To be honest.
It's maybe not in our game that I played with him.
Well, sure. It's a 6-man squad. He's got 2 Panzerschrecks in there and 5 submachine guns. So it's a good pickup. Howling Cow, no surprise there. He's got the Schrimmwagen with no transport in his armored car slot. He's got the Blitz mounted Flak 38, which is a fun.
That is cool.
A transport Schrimmwagen. Again, everybody's like, oh, yeah, that's probably for the flamethrower team. SDKFZ 251-1, which is for the Sturm Pioneers. And here's the real pickup, the Landwasser Schlepper. It's a tracked 6+ soft skin that's amphibious that can fit 20 people. So all of the Panzer Grenadiers and the first lieutenant go into the Schlepper. And I know what you guys are thinking. It's like, oh, he's just going to whack it in outflank for sectors or something like this. And basically that happened in our game, actually. He just put it in reserve and rolled on. The moment it rolled onto the board, I just put a HE round straight through it. And just went, nope, not giving that an inch. But that's a risk, right? Because I had a Chaffee with a 2-inch HE, so it's a D3. Like, even firing a 2-inch HE out of soft skin, you're trading the reliability of killing for the pinning. Now, knowing me and my stupid luck, whenever I play Michael, I rolled 4 6s in a row. So I hit on a 6 for the pins, 6 for the penetration, 6 on the damage chart, and just went, see you later. But even this is the thing, with the first lieutenant right there, his Panzer Grenadiers weren't stopped. They all piled out. He lost a few here and there in each one of the squads. His first lieutenant was already out of the vehicle at that point, and I just stopped him from moving in the transport one turn, and he just kept going after that. And so it wasn't as cut as dry. But how was your experience going into that list? You've got a lot of light mortars. You're not packing super heavy ranged AT. You're going to have a hard time popping anything armored at range. What was your game plan? Key positions. So he's also, I think he had the body count on you, or unit. He had the unit count.
He had the unit count. I think I came in from memory at 14 or 15 dice, something around there. It might have been 16, but there's a lot of light units in my list, so it doesn't play like a 16 dice list. So in key positions, the first thing I went is, what is the thing that I need to do, to try and win the game? And obviously it's hold the objectives as the primary purpose. How does my list hold objectives? I establish a 12-inch denial of light water fire away from those objectives. When people get within that 12 inches, they're then within 12 inches of a bonsai charge from fanatic Japanese. And so it's kind of like, sure, if you want to play that game, we'll play that game. But we had a lot of back and forth within our game. Our first 2 turns saw quite a few swings. I was very aggressive with one of my half tracks and ran it up the field, which was full of a light mortar team, a grenadier team, my lieutenant, and 2 of the suicide spear mines who didn't forward deploy. They actually went into the half tracks because there was a prep bombardment. So I limited all the. Was it prep bombardment, Pete? No, I can't remember.
Sectors was prep.
I deliberately put everything in the transports as opposed to deploying on the board, because he didn't put his tanks or any vehicles on the board either. So I was like, I could forward deploy but not know where they are, or I could put them in, take them in a transport, and then we'll go from there. However, on his turn 2, I think it was, the Panzerschreck unit with 2 Shreks came on. Moved me long range. I had cover from where I was, and one of them got through. One of them blew up. I lost. The Grenadiers had already gotten out, but the other 3 units that were in it all parked it, and so off one shot I lost 4 order dice. Which, look, I did what I did because I knew that I was playing the odds a little bit, so I have to I'm gonna do it again.
You take the risk.
You take the risk.
He shouldn't have made the shot for sure.
Or even if he did make the shot, I was comfortable to go that's a risk I'm willing to accept and push forward. So that meant that I had to reinforce that flank a little bit and change the battle plan. Most of our objectives were actually pretty much on the center line. And I figured he was going to push one of the flanks, either left or right. He had one unit in outflank, and he had the Schlepper with full of its goodness sitting at the back.
It's a very I feel that list pivots about really well. So you have his blitz with the autocannons. You have a couple and the Zerstörers holding that flank, and then he can just swing around. And that's certainly what I felt in our game. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to deal with, how I'm going to deal with that, but I'm going to try.
Yeah, so as the Zoofers caused the damage and things started petering out, when the Schlepper came on, I was looking at it for the first time. I went, I don't think I've necessarily got too much to do right now, so I'll have to move one of my units of light mortars out to engage it and just try and even suppress it and hold it back, force the guys to get out, and we'll see what we can do. As it was, I managed to kill it with first mortar round salvos that came through, which then proceeded to kill. I then proceeded from the damage rolls to kill off the lieutenant as well. So his units were then forced to disembark and go down. They took I'd rolled the 5 of the 6 for the D2 pins, so they'd all taken 2 pins. The lieutenant was gone, and they were forced down for the turn. And I still had a light mortar unit and the IGN machine gun team section. So it's a machine gun team with extra bodies. That was just looking at them. They were in cover, they were protected, but I was like, you come anywhere near me and my machine gun is just going to light you up. And so I was like, okay, this game's going to be a bit more interesting than what I thought, because I had the opportunity to drop extra mortars on those units.
Yeah.
And as we traded things backwards and forwards, I was going to lose the attrition game. We ended up with a draw overall, I think it was. Let me just double check. Or did Michael might have won that game?
Picked you, yeah.
Because it went down to secondaries. Yep.
So the way that scored was you had to have 2 more key positions than your opponent to win. And if you didn't, it came down to secondary. So there was quite a few games that went to secondaries in that one.
Yes, because I held 2, Mike held 1, and the other 2 were contested, which means we only had a difference of 1 overall. And so I flipped to the secondaries, and he absolutely trounced me on the secondaries, not least of which the open top vehicle that killed 4 units essentially in one turn. That had some repercussions.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, it would. I think including primaries and secondaries, it was 10-7 to his favor. So it was a pretty close game still, but he did manage to slip it out fair and square.
Yeah, given one more time, it would have been less close. I think even in about half a turn, there was some critical actions that he was positioned to take, which would have removed resistance. On the other thing, I lost my twin MMG armored car in the first turn, the flak truck came on and went, "I'll have you," and it just gone out dead. And I was like, I was kind of wanting to use those machine guns.
That's what you get for bringing that thing.
Yeah, it's true.
Oh yeah.
So Jacob, talk us through your list. Is this substantially different to the 2 platoon one you did a video on, or is it a single platoon variant?
It is a bit of a variant on the video, and then we also played another World Open War event a couple of weeks prior with Matt hosting for the most part. So this one's a variant of that as well.
Right.
So in prep for getting better at playing Germans, I just basically crammed a whole bunch of Bo's videos for the first time. Yeah, I mean, there's some good things in there. In particular, I'm still trying to figure out transports. I try and keep in mind what he said about them, and I'm using them heavily in every list that I use everywhere. And my play style's just been absolute aggression across the board, all over the place.
I felt it.
And it's been like it's worked out more. It's been more successful than it's failed, but when it fails, it can fall apart quite quickly. And it's really dependent on the terrain. And I've realized that in me testing it at home, I've got a lot of heavy terrain, particularly around the middle and all kinds of things, so it tends to work out well. And I'm playing on tables that just don't have that middle covered. So this one was like the OCP table. Everything was kind of like spread out. My opponent was Steve, but yeah, we'll go for the list. Second Louis, I chuck in the 3 men. This is what I do every time with Germans now, just to get the bonus ARs and make it a little kill squad. I'm really comfortable having vet squads down to 8 men now rather than the 10.
Yeah.
4 ARs apiece and 1 Faust is really nice. It ends up being 129 points for vets. I think that's really a safe bet points-wise, and they're effective units all the time. So last couple of times I've tended to actually have 2 squads of these. This one I pushed it to 3. They're just good all around. They don't need a transport. They're just effective everywhere. So they're really good. Going for the double sturms. So
nice.
6 boys, Flamer, Faust each, and I opt for the three subs. And they have the tiny transport, the heavy field car, which is only 22 points in experience. Then I filled in all the other slots, so medium mortar, sniper, Shrek, and Nebel. Mortar and Nebel, obviously in experience, that's what I do. Completely fine with that. And then I've been playing with the Shrek in a Kubel for a little bit. I find it's just small enough that it's just not getting targeted, which has been very good. And then this time I use the German Dacker Stuart, the P3. This is just the early war variant. It's got 2 coax and 1 other whole mount MG. So you do have some options to fire, but because it's coax, it means that you are fighting for are you using the turret or not. And then that means you're not really getting all the fancy extra shots and all that kind of stuff.
Still, though, armor 8, no vulnerabilities, none of the other awkward stuff. 18 MMG shots that can target 2 targets. It's not 150 point Stuart, don't get me wrong. But it's not bad. It's a pretty good pickup.
I changed my list to match the secondaries for this one. I don't think they were available in the first time we ran it with Matt. Which I think the players packs evolved since then.
I think the secondaries were available, but I think Matt said just for simplicity we just go for kill points. Anyway.
Okay, cool.
And I was trying to be a bit more Puritan about it. I was like, the OG experience. This thing put in a bit of work. I was kind of upset not to put in the drilling because there's a lot of secondaries about killing like an armor 7 vehicle and open topped and all kinds of stuff. So I opted. It's 5 points difference between the 2 tanks. But the list this worked out really well. I'm really comfortable with it. This is something that I would typically take moving forward. That these all seem like staples to me. At this point. But on to Steve and our game on key positions. So Steve ran a pretty, like what I would consider to be like a pretty balanced, newish to bolt action platoon, and I think this was Steve's first bolt action event. So don't worry, the moment I got in contact, the moment I saw his name on the list and I didn't recognize it, I got in contact with him and I was like, hey, just like, you're absolutely welcome, but I just want to let you know what you're in for. It's
Yeah.
the rounds are 45 minutes shorter than they normally would be. I'll get to the venue in a sec. And guys are going to be bringing their teeth, and he's like, "Nah, man, I'm all good." So he ran a 3-man Waffen SS second lieutenant squad.
Yep.
With ARs, just as cheap as chips. Actually 65 points for 3 guys with ARs in your HQ slot. It's not bad. Nothing to sneeze at. 2 10-man squads with an LMG and a Panzerfaust, 2 SMG, or 1 SMG loaded squad, another AR loaded squad. He got the LMG team in the machine gun slot, inexperienced. Squad of Stern Pioneers with a bunch of submachine guns. Medium mortar, veteran sniper team. The Panzer IV HJ, which again, it's something that we see a lot. Is like when you first start playing bolt action, you slot the medium tank in because it's the sexy thing, and everybody, like, it's real iconic. Panzer IVs, Shermans, T-34s, and stuff. But then we learn that bolt action is not that, and then we all get Stewarts and Chaffies and
points
and trash.
and then he's got a couple of trucks, which should probably be for the assault squad. So pretty like the trucks you don't see too much of. You see a lot of people like. I've seen with newbies, they seem to fall one way or other with transports. They're either all in or all out. But yeah, Stuart was pretty decently in. Again, kind of no real tricks on the reinforced platoon there. You kind of what you see is what you get. Not super salty, not super stand back and shooty. Some inefficiencies. Like a Panzer IV-H, you're just not really going to need a heavy anti-tank gun on a medium chassis. But like it does give you more flexibility. So that's I think when we talk about inefficiencies, it's about like, or at least when I say that word, is this thing in this slot designed to solve one problem? And if it isn't, it's arguably inefficient, which is a bit rich of me because everybody see my list building videos, and by that same metric, I run inefficient lists. But I've never claimed that they were efficient.
Yeah.
3 machine gun teams wasn't unfortunate.
They did their job really well.
That they did.
Played key positions.
Yep.
Nice hot under the collar action. Talk us through it. What happened?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key things that made us quite different is that the transports with me are becoming turn 1 threats across the board. And it's 3 threats, and they're spread out just enough, but enough to support each other as well.
Yeah.
So it's an immediate thing that you need to react to, and I have the expectation that these are going to become wrecks that will be cover for the troops that are coming up to support them as well. So I think it's
a standard 24-inch run. Hope they actually pop it. Land inside. Disembark and go down. If you're sticking veterans in the transport, and basically saying, please shoot them.
And again, because then you're getting the free movement with the flamer team that's inside, that's going that little bit forward, and it's working out. But obviously he hadn't come across it. He kind of spread the force too thin across the board to take everything that he could possibly do, which just meant that things aren't supporting each other. Effectively, basically, and then I just got lucky with more transports, more rolls, that kind of thing. The board was it had a very kind of open middle, which meant that I did end up losing a transport or two. One survived. It went around and got a whole position with a flame on a flank. The P4 didn't do anything meaningful other than stopping the threat of the Shrek. But it didn't necessarily kill it, and we were just going back and forth, but I was just getting lucky and getting those flame troops closer and closer, and then they just did their work, and then all the time, Nebels are coming in and mortars and all that kind of stuff. So Steve, absolutely amazing player. He did really well for being fresh to the game, and complete gentleman. Would love to play him again. Didn't really score any secondaries in this one. I think just 1 or 2 of them. So outside of the points of winning the match, just getting I got more objective points than he did. That it didn't really give me that much score, but that doesn't matter because everything falls apart in game 2 for me.
So we'll take a quick moment here to talk about the venue. So normally most of our events are either run like at clubs, so they're gaming clubs. Like Outpost has hosted a lot of our events. All the Banner Brothers ones are there. All the Skulls tournaments happen there. It's a great, fantastic venue. This one was actually run at a gaming store. This was Good Games Cannington. So massive thank you to the guys there for letting us run the event and take over the store. They're kind of branching into having wargaming tournaments held in their store. And so there was a lot of things that I wanted to make sure that we as wargamers showed them. It's like, hey, if you are clear and transparent with us, we're gonna fill your store and we're gonna spend money there. And so they gave us, it's like, hey, this is your start time, this is your finish time. And I said, okay. It meant that the game rounds had to be tight. There were hour 45 games, but again, I think there was only one game across all of the how many 21 games that were played on the day that didn't get past turn 4, so they didn't have a turn 5 start. So it's a real credit to the players, and it shows you that it can be done. But of course, a lot of that is transparency. I had a few players say, I don't want to come to this event because it's too fast paced, and I said, look, totally fair enough, I get that. It wasn't a lot, but it was a couple, and that's the thing. I think as a TO is set the expectations and make them clear so people know what to expect. But yes, the venue, they gave us every dollar in ticket price back as prize money to the players. Yeah, nice. And that was fantastic. That's a luxury that you don't get at gaming clubs because they have a whole hire, and fair enough, right? These things aren't free, and I have absolutely no issues. But sometimes you just end up with that little bit of luxury. And so we had that. That was great. War and Peace also supported us right at the last minute. That was actually my fault. Good. I think I emailed Sean, I think it was the Friday, the week before the event, or it might have been the Monday. And I was like, I'm so sorry. This completely slipped my mind. And I also told him, I was like, look, man, up front, I'm getting $20 for every player as prize money. I don't expect you to match that and go anywhere near that. All I'm really hoping for is one set of silver order dice, just so I can acknowledge the person who won. That's all that I really need. And I also told him, I was like, I get that there's a lot of other events that don't have access to this kind of prize money, and so I would much rather that you just supported those guys instead, because it's going to make a real big difference for them. Yeah. And I would, that of course, that's not my decision to make. That's Sean. I just told him, I was like, hey, this is the way that I see it, but ultimately, I don't want to tell you how to suck eggs, right? You've got your own quotas and your own policies. You do you. But yeah, the event was great. We had a computer, we had screens, we had round timers on the walls, we had drinks and snacks. It was fantastic. The staff were super great, and they were really happy to have us. So credit to all of the players. You guys showed the staff there that wargamers are somebody that they want in the store. You showed them that if you give us nice and clear, said, hey, we can do the doors at this time, and we want you guys packed up by that time, and we were actually ahead of schedule. So again, credit to the players for that. And so yeah, I think hopefully that venue will be an option for us in future, but I just really wanted to acknowledge all of the efforts of the players, because I sent out the briefing and the matchups. I think it was either the morning or the night before, and everybody basically stuck to the letter. I said, it's going to be, setup time's going to be real tight. You have your tables. What's your table numbers? What's going to happen is the doors are going to open. You're going to go in. You're going to set up the table with your opponent, and you're going to start playing as soon as you're set up. And that bought us about half hour in the day. It made a huge difference.
That was huge.
And so, it meant that some of our round times were actually 2 hours or 2 hours 15 because of that. And we still packed up ahead of schedule. So, yeah, real credit to the players. Well done to everybody for that. I know it wasn't an easy day, but the World Open War will have 2.5 round timers. Don't worry. It was just just the way that cookie crumbled. But hey, we made it work. So credit. I know that a lot of people like to say, it was a lot of the hard work from the TOs, and sure, it takes some effort to put a pack together and to pull all the strings. But what really makes a day run smoothly is players, not TOs. And so the day was super smooth and it was super painless for me. So well done to everybody I've had my little soapbox piece. I didn't get to play. I didn't even get to play as Ringer, so I can't even talk about the list that I would have run or the games that I had. So you have to give me something. Moving into round 2, we're now playing Sectors, I think.
We've got a friend who's joined us.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Now, Sectors has, I think, the dice bag deployment mechanic, which a few local players absolutely love. Looking at you, Ollie. But it does massively draw out deployment, so I gave an extra, I think it was 15 minutes or half an hour for the round. The only key difference for Sectors was that it's 1 dice roll for prep bombardment. I'm going to 2 plus both of you right here. So I don't know which one of you wants to go first and talk us through your matchups.
Yeah, I mean, let's continue on with the discussion about Mike.
Did you have him round 2?
Yeah, I had him round 2 for Sectors.
Double German on German action.
3. I played 3 Germans. Yeah. So all of them, I guess.
Go through both of your lists so we can hit the ground running.
So all my games wherever I play, I don't do the reserves. I don't do the outflank and all that kind of stuff. I really stay away from it because I don't want it to be a risk. I don't want it to be a chance that it doesn't happen. And I'm like, I'm committed. These things are coming on the board, and we're going to go from there. And that's what I do.
Fair enough. You've got a few inexperienced transports in your list.
Yeah. So I don't. But obviously, with a prep bombardment, that can be risky in itself.
Problematic.
And Mike does the complete opposite, especially with a mission that has prep. He will opt for everything off the board as possible.
Also, just in case for anybody who hasn't cottoned on yet, Sectors has a very simple strategy where you put as much in reserve as you can, and then you bring them onto the neutral quarter.
Yep.
And then you can walk on. Or if you can afford it, you whack them in outflank, and then you can literally just walk into the 3-point quarter on turn 3. And that's something a lot of players can't deal with.
Yeah.
So I suspect, having played Sectors against Michael, against that list, I think he would have done probably a lot of guys walking to the neutral quarter come turn 2.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the crux of it is like many transports, or at least many slots. A lot in reserve as it is. And although prep hit me pretty hard, I think like at least one unit was taken out, a lot of pins and all that kind of stuff. I was in a really good spot in that turn to be affecting movement was key. I was already close to getting into like the enemy sector, and I thought that everything was going to go well in the sense of the units that are on the board are going to be in trouble. His units, right? So obviously he had the mega transport with everything in it, and it just happened to be the sector that he was dropping that in. Was lightly defended. Well, it wasn't lightly defended. There was a P3 staring at it and some other units, but they had pins from the prep. So it snuck in there, as big as it was, through a ruin. And
if anybody hasn't seen the Schlepper, honestly, take a boat and stick like tiger tracks onto the hull. It's insane. It's a massive thing.
You guys have had luck destroying it before it becomes a problem. I had it become a problem. And everything that I thought that would, throw some pins on it and damage everything before the boys got out, that didn't happen because I was pinned out from prep. So, I was in a... I played how I have on everything else. Transports were all the way up, stuff right into the other sector. Right there's this schlep that just comes in behind it and everything comes out and it's all assaulty and everything comes... I end up being tabled in this one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it was a full wipe. And I don't think we even got to turn 6, and he still had most of the stuff in my sector by the end of it, because it was just like we had a turn. It's like, okay, you've got like 12 order dice here. I've got 1. Do your thing, So this one was a hard one, and it sucked, but also it sucked because it was my first game with Mike, and I want to actually have a proper non-one-sided game with him at some point, and we just haven't had the opportunity to do that yet.
He was joking after round 2 that he was going to complete his HMG trifecta on the day. So he just needed somebody to drop out for round 3 so he could play me and the entire HMG crew. Sans Tyler.
As if that hard routine.
Beaten like the HMG podcast in one day.
Doing it in one day is pretty impressive.
Yeah. I think we're almost even on games, me and Mike. I think I have like 1 or 2 on him, but not many. It's pretty close.
He's a good player.
And he comes up with these kooky lists. Yeah. There's a fun thing that happens is that we've played quite a few games on Tabletop Simulator as well.
Okay.
And it's quite funny is that whenever like we play Tabletop Simulator, I just have no answer. It's like I didn't even show up. I was like, why am I here? They're just absolutely sweeping the floor with me. And then when I play him in real life, what usually happens is I will just have some bullshit roll that will just turn off his ability to win. Like, Flepper walks on, I'm just going to delete it. There was another game where we were playing double envelopment and he was about to win, and I just get a mortar straight through the roof of half track and kills all of the units inside. It's just like, well, now it's my game to win. But yeah, so hopefully he doesn't table me. I'm not really looking forward to that. Wouldn't be the first time for me, but yeah, not looking forward to it.
Yeah, so I definitely got a loss. It says here I got 4 tournament points. I don't know how. Oh no, that's overall from where we are because you only scored 3. Okay, all right. Yeah. So I killed 5 of his units somehow. And
it was 44-5.
Yes, this one was a tough one. And
that makes the game I'm about to talk about look good.
Forgive me if I'm wrong. Did he get top player for the event?
No, he got pipped at the post.
Yeah, okay.
But coming into round 3, he was ahead on primaries by 10 points, and he was ahead on secondaries by 2 points.
Oh, so close.
So he was, and then
he was at the top.
He was right at the top. So he was on even number of wins. And for those who have been tuning into all of our event recaps, it was the Entente Cordiale was the top 3 players. So with Ollie, Mike, and Matt coming into round 3. So no real surprise there. They're all guns, but just to see Mike slip out in front of Matt coming into round 3 was a bit of a surprise.
That is cool.
And well earned by the sounds of it.
Yep.
So Dan, how was your round 2?
So round 2, we had a little bit of a Japanese civil war. So I fought against Dave Davison,
one of the armchair generals. Yep, very nice.
And so he's again wargaming quite a while. Has been involved in action for quite a while. Knows what he's doing with his lists. Has previously played. I think you've seen events over in South Africa and stuff. Very much aware of what can and can't be done. So his Japanese list was a bit more of a typical Japanese list that you would expect to see at an event.
Yeah, with some things I wouldn't have expected to see. So he had a 3-man first lieutenant, which was one of the surprises.
Yes.
He had a Shudan paratrooper squad, also a bit of a surprise.
No, they're good though.
Oh, yeah, no argument. It's here, but you don't normally see them.
No.
I'd say uncommon. Veteran IJA squad, pretty standard stuff there. Kimpeti political officer.
Yep.
Also,
which was funny because I had one as well.
Right. Yeah, I'm not super convinced by this model. Like, I get why people pick it up, but I can't.
You've got another buddy.
We need to get them. Get
Jacob's
the HMP shirt.
Jacob's having the time of his life over there.
Yeah, medic, which I think again, like I get what you're saying.
That was
unexpected, but
there's having played him, I know why and how, and we can talk about what those things look like in a second. But
two bamboo spearfighter squads at 15 each.
Yes,
pretty standard stuff there. Native irregular squad, which I really like as a pickup, actually. I get why people wouldn't take them, but I'm a fan.
Yeah.
I think given what they do though, there are better, cheaper alternatives in IGA.
Mhm.
Yeah, Imperial Japanese. Heavy mortar. I'm surprised that didn't see the spigot, to be honest. I think this. I can't remember the points exactly, but I think the spigot's just better.
Well, it's not necessarily better. It's a pin suppression unit, but it loses the penetration value. So,
Okay.
so the thing is, like, you get a massive amount of pins, and you lock a unit out typically, and you go, right. Well, that unit is just not doing anything until it rallies. So that's either going to guarantee your next activation, or I'm just going to hit you again and I'm pin you out.
Yeah.
Whereas with the heavy mortar, you will get the
damage.
penetration plus pins and probably fold the unit. Because
Right.
the other one's limited to only +1 penetration. I think it's might be +2.
Okay.
Yeah, it's quite a bit lower.
Yeah, that's cute.
Well, I mean, it does 2d6 pins.
Yeah, sniper team, flamethrower team, anti-tank rifle team. I personally not a huge fan in it. He's got 2 suicide anti-tankers. I would have preferred a third rather than the anti-tank rifle team.
Well, actually, Japan can take the anti-tank rifle team as well as a third. So they can take an anti-tank. Yeah, so wherever you have the ability to take an anti-tank slot, you can take your improvised anti-tank or your suicide anti-tank teams as well as an anti-tank rifle. So they would get the 4 spaces. Now, he chose not to do it in this instance because his actual force, he essentially was using that anti-tank rifle the same way I use them in my Soviets as an additional sniper.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I think the spigot mortar is not a generic reinforced platoon thing. Anyway, I'm getting stuck on that. Medium anti-tank gun as veteran. I'm not convinced by that pickup. I wonder if that was like an event, like a player's pack read. You know, you're looking at like 1,100 points.
There's going to be a decent vehicle.
I might see a big vehicle.
Yeah. I think that's where that's coming from. Obviously, I don't want to put words in David's mouth, but yeah, that's kind of where I think that one came from. And the ubiquitous Ho-Ro, great bit of kit, and a Kurogane. I think it's just a truck.
It's just transport. It's a Jeep.
Transport. Jeep, cool.
Yeah.
Interesting list.
Yeah.
I think it's a much more balanced list than you typically see Japanese. They tend to. I've either seen like full bamboo spearmen, or I've seen like full veteran blocks, which are just like impossible to deal with. This fanatic riflemen are a huge pain. But yeah, go ahead, Dan. How's the game go?
Yeah, so it's we actually got started and about 3 or 4 dice into, or 2 or 3 dice or something like that into turn 1, we realized we were meant to roll for prep bombardment. And so we backtracked. We both agreed and went, no, look, we're fanatics, so we know nothing's going to run away because we're immune to those tests. So it's simply pin suppression. We can undo what we've got here. So we went back and redid it, all like 30-something units that we had. And the result of that was David had probably one of the average results of a prep bombardment. So 1s, 2s, misses, a hit or so, that was fair. I had something that was significantly above average. I don't think I missed any single unit. And I think only 1 or 2 units took 1 pin. And I rolled 4 or 5 6s on his units and was basically deleting models. One of them was on a bamboo spearman squad, so they had to force to roll for green immediately. One of them was on improvised anti-tank model and it obliterated him completely. One was on the veteran anti-tank gun, which was positioned facing and so I reduced that to 2 out of 3 straight away with pins, on 2 pins. And so his whole force just went from, essentially, we think we're okay to, no, everything's on 2 pins, is pretty much how that went.
Ouch.
It was we're both looking at it going, okay, I guess this is what we're doing then. And so, because at this point, because he knew that I had 10 light mortars, and he knows obviously how the light mortars work, and so he's going, all you have to be able to do is clear your 1 pin or no pin units, get them out of the transports, because they were all hiding in the transports from the prep bombardment, vomit them out with the clown car, drop the light mortars on my bamboo spearmen, and once those 2 units disappear, I don't actually have many teeth that you can't deal with just through machine gun fire, for example, because the numbers in his squads weren't as high. They were still more than mine, mind you. Now, this is where it gets a little bit funny, because in that first turn following up from that, I then proceeded to fail, I think, 5 or 6 order checks to activate anything, including units that were only on 1 pin, including units that were only on 1 pin and range of the lieutenant. And I just was like, that most of them I was willing to work around. So my sniper failing his auto check, okay, look, he's a sniper, he's going to go down, he's going to be really hard to hit, and the only thing that's probably going to try and take him on in this first shot is the opponent's sniper. They've already shot at me, so no big deal. I had some the spear lunge miners, because I had no idea where his tank was, but because we're playing sectors, I just forward deployed them into the neutral sector. Forget doing any kills here. You're worth 4 or 6 points over there. Go be busy over there and don't get killed. So I wanted to move them to a more advantageous position, because I knew that he would be bonsaiing his spearmen, and I knew that he'd try and drop some of those pins off by using bonsai. So I was trying to use those forward deployers to get into line of sight, so that they would be the closest line of sight model. So he'd be forced to bonsai away to the neutral corner, give my mortars more time. They went down instead. As it turned out, things started going backwards and forwards. It was a great game. Dave's a really good opponent. We enjoyed that part. The thing that really stuck me was that my forward half track, which was lined up to just beeline straight across into a neutral sector and then basically disgorge 3 units into that space and start clamping down on a bit of terrain. Like, I'd lined it up. I was like, my first move, first activation, this is going to be there, which gets it out of line of sight from everything. The gun's not on ambush, so I don't have to worry about that. Zip it across, even if it takes a shot. It's on 2 pins, I don't care. It's like, I'll get it across, and then I can claim that quarter and be ready for whatever he brings on and just counterattack straight away. So that was one of the units that failed its order test. So it then had to pivot to face, because there was something in its forward arc that had forward deployed, which was his sniper. So I had to pivot to face the sniper and attempt to back up, which I then couldn't back up properly because I had put it on a road in between 2 stone walls. And so I stopped at the stone wall, and one of my units was in the way, and I went, I can't actually move. So I've slanted my armor. That's fine. That's all right. I can work with that. As the turn progressed, this traffic stop that I created for me became a massive problem and liability. And basically, it ended up stalling between what was in the transport, what was surrounding the transport, the armored car that was behind the transport, the light mortar that was caught in, because everything I put so that he wouldn't get a nice, easy shot or a charge on anything. And I was just going to move a clump of units so that if he had to charge something, he was going to have to charge a vehicle. And basically, his fanatic fighters were not going to kill the vehicle outright, certainly not easily. But by that point, it's like, well, then everything that was behind that vehicle that you've now killed is now just going to come over the top and slash you back or whatever. And so it was always going to be a punch counter punch.
Yeah.
But I managed to somehow create a traffic jam. And the funny part was in turn 3, when those paratroopers came on that we were talking about before, they ran up the field on turn 2, ran forward on turn 3. So by the time the transport got round to activate, they could now see those paratroopers, which were then closer because I'd pivoted, or I'd attempted to try to pivot. I'd failed the auto check again, but this time the paratroopers were closer. So I had to do a full 180 and face the paratroopers, show the rear armor of the half track to the anti-tank gun, and reverse back where I'd come from to begin with.
Man.
It was the sort of thing. And meanwhile, my armored car, on no pins, by the way, is just like, and I can't maneuver because I'm not allowed to run over the guys next to me. I can't reverse because there's a team behind me, and I'm a wheeled vehicle, so I can't even drive over the wall. Half track, just get out of the way. I need to drive forward. And so it wasn't actually a deployment mess up. I had a plan with what I was going to do on how it was deployed, even with the bombardment, but it just didn't happen. Like, the dice were like, that's cute, and they just didn't let me do anything. So as it turned out, when those bamboo spear fighters actually got into the mix, even though I'd reduced them, I had one of them up to 7 pins. I needed one more
Wow.
pin. I had 5 units that were going to shoot that unit, and it was going to fold due to being pinned out. And then I was like, okay, 5 units. I just need 1 to succeed. I had 1 ranged in mortar ready to go. I was like, you just need to roll 2, and he's done. All 5 units proceeded to miss, and I went, well, there goes, and so they were not only did they proceed to then kill something, they ended up in my quarter, so they were worth 3 points simply for being there, and they were on 8 pins or something, because then they'd upgraded. No, they must have been on 8 pins because they were regulars. They got the upgrade from the prep bombardment, and that prep bombardment that killed a guy lost me from pinning that unit out.
What a frustrating game. I mean, bolt action happens.
It was great. Dave and I really enjoyed the game, but we had some moments in there where we were just like, how?
I think sometimes you only see stuff like that when you get these mirror matchups, because like we both want to play the same way, and so then when you get these two things just bump into each other, it's not a it's a recipe for disaster, and disaster does like to strike. So you were coming out of that round with so David had 30 points.
Oh yeah.
And you weren't too far behind by the looks of it. You're 15, half. That's a fair bit behind.
Much better than me.
9 of his points were because he had 3 units in my quarter straight away.
Right.
But also we had I struggled to kill any of his units completely off. Whereas he had killed, I think, a good sort of 6 or 7 worth of mine. And so I just couldn't stop him in the neutral quarters as well. So he ended up outnumbering me in the neutral quarters plus the kills plus the 3. He played well.
Yeah, David does not pull punches. He's a fun, fair guy to play, but when he swings hard. So moving into round 3, and we are looking at meeting engagement, which I don't know why it's in a tournament pack, but I think this is just a mission that everybody plays when they're first learning bolt action, and I think it's like I think it's just a pretty boring mission all up, but I mean I picked it out of the 5 that are in there, so who really gets the last laugh. I'm really just criticizing myself at this point. So Dan, you played Adrian, which was one of the other new guys. So Steve and Adrian are brothers. One of them got wooden spoon, the other one got best sport, and hilariously it was almost a tie for both of them. So I'm hoping to see them both back. Hopefully not as wooden spoons.
They seem pretty keen.
So Adrian was running the Soviet list. I'm certain with Dan we can probably just go into your game. Soviet list, again, kind of more or less what you'd expect to see from somebody newer to bolt action. Particularly with kind of leaning away from some of the things that you would expect to see in a Soviet list. So let's get the key thing out of the way. KV2. I mean, very brave, dropping 300 points on that thing. It's a huge pain to deal with, especially with the hull-mounted MMG, the rear turret MMG, and of course a heavy howitzer in the front. Actually kind of awkward because you could just walk up and shoot in 3 different directions.
It's so he had I think 4 units of 8 Soviet Guard with submachine guns, and he only had 1 anti-tank rifle, had a sniper.
Did have the tank hunter anti-tank team, which I
did have the tank hunter anti-tank team. Those I'll get to them in a second. There's obviously the free inexperienced rifles and a lieutenant as well.
And the M5 half track rounds you out with the sniper team.
One of the first questions that I asked, because I didn't recognize Adrian, and so one of the first questions that I asked was that, have you played much bolt action? And then the guy across the table from me goes, no, we've already swapped tables. And I'm sitting there going, I know, I've come to this table to fight Adrian. I don't recognize who you are. You're obviously Adrian. And he points over to the guy at the other table. He's like, no, we swapped tables. I know, Gorcin was just saying we're going to do a table swap. And I was actually talking to Steve. And And Adrian leans over and goes, no. What Steve's trying to tell you is that you were on this table, but we've already swapped you, but you have to move and you need to come fight me on this table. So that was the starting setup of our game. And so then I re-asked...
Standard round 3 brains fried. Yeah.
I then re-asked my question of like, okay, so how many games of Vault Action have you played? Because I haven't seen you around or whatever. And he's like, oh look, I've only played like 5 or 6 games, and 3 of them have been today, or something along those lines. And I was like, that's fine. I was like, if I'm going too fast, if you have questions, standard stuff, like just let me know. But I said, I'm also, my list probably isn't designed to make you think necessarily harder than what you will, because it's a different setup. So we'll walk it through. And so I didn't go with the intent to make it a learning game. I did say, no, we'll play it out as best as we can. I'll give them a good game. And then as we went forward, I set up my deployment and then completely muddled up the fact that when you do first wave, you don't roll order checks to come on. So he deployed everything, so that wasn't a problem. And I, for the first turn, had left my entire stuff that I put in first wave. I was rolling order tests and failing, mind you. And so I was leaving them off the board, and half force just didn't come on. And then Gorcin comes over and goes, "You spoon."
Players and viewers at home, I want you to all know that I did not let that lie. I walked past Dan, and he's like, "Oh, you're ripping the reserves off for first wave." I was like, "Dan, you of all people, come on, man."
My brain was fried. So once I actually got my army onto the field, so Adrian graciously let me just take essentially a move on and pick up from where they were, and so that was very gracious of him. And I went, okay, now that my army's here, I'm going to show you what I actually would normally have done with it. And so I moved my first light mortar team out, and I sighted the building where his sniper was, and I went, okay, I'm going to fire my light mortar at your sniper in the building. The reality is that it's going to penetrate down through the floors, 4+4+, wherever it lands, and then it's going to blow up, and whoever's ever on that floor is unfortunately going to cop AG shell. So I was like, but I'm trying to get rid of the sniper is the thing. So it then proceeded to go through the attic floor, through the floor the snipers were on, and explode on the floor where the anti-tank team was. And I was like, okay, cool. So a number of units hit building, blah, 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 and wiped out the anti-tank team. And I was like, okay, cool. That's reasonable. That's something that can happen in a game. That's all right. And then the next portion of the game was me just running my army away from the KV2's line of sight. So he was trying to just advance up. I was trying to drop mortars where I could to create suppression. Several of them were hitting and at least trying to stack on pins to do things. I had a moment of the game which was quite... I dismounted a unit with light mortars and they just shot over at something to try and put pins on it, and I had 2 mortars hit off the dismount, and I was like, I feel a little bit bad about that because you chose not to go down, so you're only taking D2 pins, but I'm potentially hitting 4 models, and I did wipe off like 4 models from that unit at the time, and I was like, this is just nuts. Like, he can't afford that on that unit. But then he was like, well, what do I do with the KV2? And I was like, I mean, it's got a heavy howitzer, right? So any of my infantry units are just going to basically disintegrate if you hit. So pick one. It doesn't matter which one. I was like, you just need to drive to a point where you can see something, and you just need to waste with the machine gun or the heavy howitzer. But the heavy howitzer is going to make a mincemeat of anything if it touches it. And we were playing on what I would consider a fairly open board. We were playing on Chris Ramsey's one where it had the big stone fencing stuff in the middle with essentially the cross section.
I love that, like, ring road. Oh man, it's so much fun.
It's a lot of people don't they don't necessarily think about the fact that the road rings around the whole way, and so that when you're staying on the road and you have dual pivots, for example, with a wheeled vehicle. And it's like now you're shooting like down the length of your battle line. Like, but you were a second ago. How does that? Yeah, either way. But it is, once you're inside that stone circle, it's actually quite open. There's not necessarily a lot that was on that particular board at that time, which is fine. It's just, there's plenty of other places to hide before you commit there. Center objectives suck. I've had to play that before. But anyway, we're lighting it up, and I'm like, I don't want to dance with that KV2. And so I was moving around, doing everything I could. And I realized that because of where his infantry were coming in, I went, I reckon that's 12 inches. Now, my anti-tank guys had run in and already failed completely at their one assigned job in my list. All three of them. They one route out in front of a half track. Adrian got the first dice and blew it away. I was like, it's fine. I've got 2 going on the KV2. It's all right. I can see. I get. He gets the next dice out, blows another one away, and I went, I don't like where this is going anymore. And so I ran out of those guys, and I went, I'm going to kill the KV2 with, I don't know, maybe my 15 inexperienced guys will just like knock on the hatch. I don't know. But where he was moving his infantry into, I was like, I reckon that's probably within 12. And so I was looking at the borders like, but because they weren't the closest, I couldn't bonsai charge. And so my unit of 15 rifles on 1 pin, I was like, I need to charge up here first, but they're not the closest, so I have to actually pass an order check on the -1 on an experienced unit. Then I potentially would, off casualties, become green, which would be great, because if they upgrade, it makes me more susceptible to being able to do stuff. Got in, killed the first unit, stayed green and inexperienced. So I was like, okay, now I'm just inexperienced, basically in front of a heavy howitzer. My life has never been. And so then,
situation excellent. I attack.
Unfortunately, the heavy howitzer missed. I really, really wanted it to hit for Adrian. Like I wanted him to put that 4-inch template down and just cause havoc with me. Because then when I looked across, I was like, those guys look like they were within 12. So the remaining like 14 or 13, I can't remember how many spearmen were there. Well, they weren't spearmen, they were riflemen, but they were operating like spearmen. It was like they basically picked up and I was like, well, we're going to charge over there. I was within range. Yes, he got shots on me, but coming across, I lost maybe 1 or 2 on the way in, and then I killed everybody. And I was like, right, okay. And that one unit that was left, which was the one that I magically pinned when they dismounted from the transport, I then managed to collect them the turn afterwards because, once again, the heavy howitzer missed. And I was just like... Meanwhile, the light mortars have killed everything on the other flank. Like, they've just... Everything's dead. And I'm like, this is not the sort of game I thought I was going to have with you. Like, I thought it was going to be a bit more than that. I actually thought he was going to win that game because I had nothing to deal with that KV2. I knew that he was probably going to gun down the lunge miners, and I was like, that's exactly what you need to do. And then his infantry, point for point, were better than my infantry in terms of their armament and what they could do by moving up and taking the shots. So I was expecting him to win those fights as well. But he just didn't get the dice, or it's not that he didn't get the dice out, he just didn't get the conversion of those hits when needed on that big unit of 15, which allowed me to mop up 3 units in 3 turns, which meant that suddenly he'd lost control of the center. Which for the game that we were playing with the kills and the ratios, it was like that actually didn't work out in his favor. However, I think I only won. What was the end score on that one, Gorcin? Do you have that there?
Yeah, I do. It was 6-2.
Yeah, it wasn't actually. It wasn't
a blowout.
actually massive. No, it was. And so if I took those three points away for the 15-man squad, and if he'd killed that 15-man squad, it's 3-3. Like, and so it was a lot closer before that interaction happened. And then afterwards, I was like, sorry.
So, fun game round 3. It really seems like the top of the table was basically who did well in sectors coming into round 3. That's really the main divider. It's obviously who had 2 wins, and then out of those ones, it's who did well in sectors. So, Jacob, your round 3 was against Sean.
Yes, another German list.
Sean, another Sherman list, but Sean was having an actually very interesting list.
Oh man, I want this. I just can't afford all the minis.
I can't say that I'm like a huge fan of the list for myself. I have played against it, and I got mopped up by it. But that's because I kind of played it the exact opposite way that you're supposed against it. So his list is a regular second lieutenant as a 3-man squad, 2 squads of Ostrippen at minimum sizes and shirkers. He's got 1 squad of pioneers. I think it's like a 6-man squad with a flamethrower. He's got a squad of SS Cav, which are just fanatics of submachine guns and assault rifles. They don't actually on cav on horses. Sniper team, flamethrower team, and then here's where it gets fun. He's got the Kugel Blitz,
which
is a hot bit of kit.
Oh yeah.
And he's got 1-250-9. So that's the autocannon half track. And then he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 250-1 half tracks with a single MMG. So these are Armor 7 open top. So this is probably as close, and they're all veteran as well.
Yeah.
Which this is probably as close as you can get to a German Bren carrier spam.
Yep.
Because they're 5-man transports, Armor 7 open top with an MMG. So it's probably the closest you can get. I think the Bren carrier is more efficient.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Shots and all the other sorts of stuff. It's probably the closest you can get as a German Bren carrier spam. The mistake that I made playing against it was that I kept my distance and I was trying to isolate the half tracks and trying to rely on my chaffee or get an ambush of the flame. And it's the exact opposite way that you beat this list. Or rather, that's exactly how you lose to this list. How you beat this list is you just run at it. Yes, he can outrun you and stuff, but ultimately, if he's playing meeting engagement, you just run up and punch the transport. The squad, the 5-man squad of Shirkers is going to get out to defend it. You're going to immediately murder them, and they're going to kill the transport. And you just rinse and repeat on that. I think the way they want to play is they want to sit back, they want to put some pins on you with MMGs, trick you down, and then basically get you to the point where you can't assault the transports, and then they have a field day. Because you just don't have enough, particularly as an allied player, you don't have enough AT going up against Germany with a bunch of Panzerfausts. I would suspect. It's not so straightforward. So, Jacob, how did it go? I remember there being a lot of dead things in the middle.
This was... I suspected that he was going to play defensive and be as far back away from me as possible. So I just said straight down the middle, let's just chuck the transports, let's do it. I'm hoping to get the movement. I'm hoping that the transport dies so the flamer gets closer to him. That's it. That's it. Everything go and immediate threats all the way. And he's feeling the pressure straight away. It's like, oh my god, it's everywhere.
Jacob's everywhere.
This one was like turn 1 pops my transport, gets D6 hits on the Sturms in it and kills every single one of them. But that's followed up with the little Kubel following it behind with the Shrek that comes out and pops that unit. So that ended up working out okay. It's not a 1-to-1 conversion. He beat me on points and everything else, and that unit would have been useful elsewhere. But we were both feeling a little bit like, this is how it's going to go. And I'd successfully pinned a lot of stuff with the Nebel and the mortar and all that kind of stuff. So for about 2 or 3 turns, he had transports that just weren't activating. And I felt very confident getting a lot of troops down the middle. None of the Fausts claimed to kill.
Right.
Yeah. So and most of them hit actually. We just got some bad rolls on the damage table and that kind of stuff.
I shouldn't have made this bold claim about how.
I've scaled back to just 1 Faust per squad, and I think that's more the threat that it exists matters more than what it actually does.
I think the way that I've seen the math broken down is 2 is like a pretty decent chance you'll hit and kill. 3 is the thing's dead.
Yeah, pretty much.
And for those units that can take 4, it's like you're now in overkill territory.
Yeah.
Oh, it's more so like 3 at 1 target. If you're firing 1, you're kind of relying on luck. If you're firing 2, I think it's like a 65% chance on average you'll go right through it. But if you've got 3, I think it's like nearly a 90% chance or something. So assuming all things being equal.
The thought process is 5 vet squads in total with a Faust each, typically going up against an opponent that may have a transport and 1 tank. Then I'm pretty much covered across the board, and I don't, I've got redundancy everywhere. But when it's
any deployment mistakes in outmaneuvers,
but when you've got a list that's just all vehicles, It can change.
Actually,
Yeah. So we got quite close, and then we had multiple transports covering each other for the assaults and that kind of stuff, and then I'd wipe an Ostripin squad, and then a Kugel Blitz is just mowing down the guys that are now not in cover and all that kind of stuff. So it was a very bloody game. We both lost a hell of a lot of stuff. I think we were even on the kills, or maybe he got one over me on the kills, but just because I had infantry everywhere, I was doing secondaries all over the place, and obviously there's all the secondaries that are about killing us +7 armor thing and all that kind of stuff. So I think that pushed me over
90% of his list.
Yeah. So without the secondaries, he would have won, I think. No, I think it was technically a draw based on the fact that you need to get 2 above. I think he got 1 above in kills, something like that. And then
So, just looking at it now, it was actually 9 kills to 6 in your
okay,
and 15 to 10 secondaries. I think your secondary score was the single highest secondary score of the day.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I claimed everything.
Highest of the day was 13. And that was actually the same round. So you were head and shoulders above everybody in getting secondaries. I think you scored 16 is the most you can score.
Yes, I'm sure.
You scored all 15 in one game.
Not all of them intentionally. Mostly just wanting to destroy as much as I can. But the Kubel, it didn't die. It was on 4 pins at one point. Those autocannons did work. They minced some squads towards the end. And if we played for another round or two, then I think it would have been really in his favor if that ended up happening. But I think we even got to turn 7. And this one was really, really quick because there wasn't too much actions that he could do.
Sure.
First time played Sean. Very cool list. Definitely some minis I want to pick up. That was awesome. So that was the day for me.
Yeah, it was a great day overall. The top 3 spots. First one went to Matt Ed. No real surprise to anybody here, I think, on that one. The second spot went to Ollie, which is one of his mates.
That's awesome.
Ollie played very well.
Very good player.
Third spot went to Kane. He actually leapfrogged Mike right on that last round. I think it's also it does. I was thinking about the math a little bit, but it actually doesn't really matter. It's just that the WoW TC is 0 for losses. So it's 3-1-0 rather than 3-2-1. But it actually doesn't matter.
Kind of won't matter.
Because it's +1. If everybody's gaining +1s on losses, it's the same as everybody gaining +0 on losses.
Yep.
I think the numbers are different, but it doesn't break the pattern anyway. I think Kane had a draw instead of a loss in one of his rounds, and that's what allowed him to leapfrog Mike right at the end there. But even at the end of the day, that all being said, if we went purely on countbacks, Mike had 55 victory points, 31 secondaries, whereas Matt in first place had 48 and 26. So it really was. Obviously, we had 3 wins versus 2 wins and a loss.
Yep.
So you win on wins. But looking at that, it's just wow, that's a pretty
big difference.
Yeah, and I think it just goes to show if you are at a tournament and you really are trying to win your best, if you have a game where you can win hard, it really makes the difference. So let's say, for example, that Matt and Mike didn't verse each other in round 3. Let's say we had a bigger pool, and you had a group of players who all could have theoretically ended up on 3 wins if your player pool is big enough on a 3-game day. Then it really would have actually gone to Mike, for example, if we just had a couple more players. Maybe not a couple more. I forget the exact number that you need, but it becomes pretty substantial to get 4 people through. But it's a pretty interesting thing to look at, something like this, where it's not just, obviously it is about winning, getting your 3 wins or your 5 wins or whatever it is across the game day. That's important. But also, if you have an opportunity to win big, you really have to seize it. It's the way that you end up at the top of the ladder. So, and also, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I do think that is the key takeaway when wanting to step into these sort of competitive formats, is that it's about minimizing the points that you can lose, and it's about maximizing the points that you can gain. Obviously, the precursor is you need to win the games typically. There are some outliers that maybe, you can get through with a certain amount of draws, but the reality is you want to be winning your games and you want to be maximizing the points that you can. And that's where previous episodes of this podcast where we talk about, where can you minimize your losses, for units, keeping them safe, when do I move something out of the way, all those. This is the sort of format where those are very critical decisions that you need to make.
And also, like, some decisions that go into list building. And I remember talking to Mike about this. Mike was like, the list that I built smashes key positions and it smashes sectors. You've got high order dice, you've got high mobility, you have kill potential in a few key units in the right places at the right time. Obviously, his whole list can kill, but some are more killy than others. But he's like, when it comes to meeting engagement, I'm pretty much trading for most of it. And that's more or less what happened. I think the meeting engagement, believe it or not, that top table, adding primary and secondary together, they both scored 20 points. But of course, we do the primaries first, and Matt sneaked out on 12, and Mike was in on 9. And it was just was just the 1 point different. Had he closed that gap, had either one of them closed that gap and made it an 11-10 game, either way, it actually would have gone to Mike.
Wow.
It was very, very close. So, yeah, it's nice to see that people can compete with Matt now, because for a while there he seemed to be top dog and nobody could really compete at his level. But hey, nice to see that's changing. And one of our own homegrown as well. So, yeah, fantastic effort to everybody on the day. I've said my piece on that front, but I think it was just really interesting. Definitely going to be forwarding these results on to Russell Wright. And I think and Bo's in that chat as well. So Jacob will make sure to mention that that we name drop Bo, and that you've got a studying student of his. And those who don't know, Bo Mortensen's bolt action tutorials on YouTube is basically not just basic training and initial military employment training, but also the school of bolt action, as far as I'm concerned.
100%.
It's all very, very solid. Very solid.
And I don't want people to think that it's only for newbies. Every time I sit down and watch one of his videos, I'm just like, no, you're right. That is how you do that. Particularly the recent one that stuck with me was the assault one that he did, and how that worked. Yeah, there was a lot of like rules as written stuff in there that you just go, like, it shouldn't work that way, but it does. So that's the game that we play. So yeah, don't think just because you're not new to bolt action that you don't need to study Bo Mortensen's videos. Yeah, just a shameless plug there. We're not getting paid by him, but we probably should be. That was great. That's it for me. Do you guys have anything else to round out the show?
Look, I think this was a very and the building to, I guess, this sort of format. It's very encouraging to see, as you say, that we've got players coming up the ranks that are willing to push and try, and those differences that we see, like whilst we end up with, if we just look at names on a ladder, it might look like the top portion is sort of was staying the same for a little bit. It's actually not, and it's actually a lot closer than what we thought it might have actually been. That's very good to see. And then the other thing is even the growth of how the formats are working, and we won't always do competitive formats. We'll do all sorts of different things, but it's like, the moving forward is like to see our competitive set of parameters, call them, on how that's operating. They're becoming a little bit matured in how we want to do those and what's working and what isn't. That's exciting for Perth.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself.
Awesome. Well, thanks for another episode of HMG. You'll probably catch us next time talking about the next event that we just did. That was hosted by Dan. So that was Dueling Aces, which is a doubles event. We've ran it once before. So if you're interested in hearing more about bolt action event chat with the HMG crew, do catch us in the next episode. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Jacob. We got Gorcin. Goodbye. Hey, bye, whatever. And Dan, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone.